Montana Territory, September 1883. The train hissed and groaned as it came to a stop at the dusty depot in Willow Creek, steam curling into the cold morning air like breath from a dying animal. On the wooden bench beneath the depot's overhang sat a woman in a pale blue traveling dress, her gloved hands clenched tight in her lap. Her carpetbag rested beside her boots, untouched since she had stepped off the train an hour ago. Her name was Prudence Lark, and she had not spoken a word since she arrived. The man she was supposed to marry never came. Harland Ellery saw her the moment he rode into town. He was dropping off supplies from his ranch 2 miles north, thinking only of tobacco and nails and the pie cooling on the windowsill back home. But something about the way the woman sat still as river ice, eyes locked on nothing, shoulders drawn like she was bracing for a blow, made him stop. He dismounted slow, tying his horse to the rail, and walked over. "You waiting on someone, ma'am?" he asked gently. She did not turn. "I was." Harland glanced up the road. The stage had already passed through. No one else had stepped off the train. "Do you know his name?" "Luther Granger. He sent for me." Her voice cracked like thin glass. "We exchanged letters. He proposed." She looked down at her hands. "He was supposed to be here." Harland had never met a Luther Granger. He knew most men in the valley, at least by name. "Do you have family nearby?" "No, just me." She blinked fast, her mouth trembling. "I came from Illinois. I do not have anywhere else to go." The depot agent gave her a wide berth, clearly unsure how to handle her. Folks in town had already started whispering. Harland could hear it: mail order bride, left high and dry, poor thing. He looked back at her, and something in him shifted. Maybe it was the way she kept herself upright despite the shaking. Maybe it was the fact she had not cried, even though she clearly wanted to. "I'll sit with you a while," he said, taking a spot beside her on the bench. "You do not have to." "I know." She said nothing more, but she did not ask him to leave. They sat in silence as the wind picked up, stirring her skirt and tugging at the brim of his hat. Her body gave one small shudder, then another, and he could see the fight she was putting into holding herself together. Her breath hitched once, and her hands curled tighter. "You cold?" he asked, already shrugging off his coat. She hesitated, then nodded. He wrapped it around her shoulders, careful not to touch her more than he had to. She was stiff beneath it, but her trembling slowed. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm Harland Ellery. I run a cattle ranch up the road. You can see the ridge from here, Bluff Hill, right there." She looked, and for the first time he saw a flicker of life in her eyes. She was young, could not have been more than 22, but the weight in her gaze made her seem older. Her voice was steady now, but quiet. "Prudence Lark." "Miss Lark," he said with a nod. "Just Prudence, please." He nodded again. "All right, Prudence." They sat a while longer. The sun climbed higher and the depot cleared out. Still, Harland stayed beside her. When her shaking finally stopped, she let out a long breath and turned to him. "I do not know what to do." "You do not have to decide right now," he said. "Come back with me. I have a warm place, food. You can rest, just until you figure things out." She hesitated. "People will talk." "They already are." That made her smile, just a little, faded quick. "Why are you being kind to me?" He met her eyes. "Because it is the right thing to do." She studied him a moment longer, then nodded. He helped her up, picked up her carpetbag, and led her to his horse. "You ride?" "Not well." "Then I will walk him," he said. "It is not far." They took the trail slow, the sky turning golden above them. Willow Creek faded into the distance. Prudence walked close, but not too close, her steps quick to match his. She did not speak, and neither did he. But the silence between them was no longer empty. It was something else now, something steadier. When they reached the house, she stared at it like it was too good to be real. It was not much, a single-story ranch house with smoke curling from the chimney and a porch that creaked, but it was solid. Safe. Harland opened the door. "Come on in." She stepped inside and breathed in the scent of wood smoke and bread. Her eyes flicked to a quilt draped over the back of a chair, the polished table, the clean floor. "You live alone? For now." He pointed to the spare room. "That one is yours. You can rest, wash up. Supper will be ready soon." She nodded, voice soft. "Thank you, Harland." He gave her a small smile. "You are welcome, Prudence." That night, she did not eat much, but she sat at the table across from him, her shoulders a little looser. He asked nothing of her, did not press. When she finally said good night and closed the door to her room, he sat on the porch a long time after, listening to the quiet. Inside, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her hands still wrapped in the warmth of his coat. She had been left behind. But maybe she had not been completely forsaken. Maybe someone was meant to find her after all. Prudence woke to the sound of chopping wood, steady and rhythmic. For a moment, lying beneath a thick wool quilt in a bed that didn't rock or rattle, she forgot where she was. Then her eyes found the hand-carved beam above her, and the memories returned, not all at once, but slow, like light creeping through frost-laced glass. She dressed in silence, the blue of her skirt dulled from the long journey, the hem still carrying dust from the depot floor. Her hair tangled at the ends, but she twisted it back as neatly as she could without a mirror. The small basin in the corner held fresh water and a folded towel. She washed her face, the cold stinging her skin and waking something steadier inside her. When she stepped into the main room, Harland was just setting a tin bucket near the stove, his sleeves rolled up, collar damp with sweat. He looked up, nodded once, and went back to his task. "You sleep all right?" he asked, not turning. "I did," she said. "Thank you for the room." He glanced over his shoulder then, expression unreadable. "You're welcome." She lingered near the doorframe, unsure where she fit in the space. The table had 2 chairs. The shelves held simple tin dishes. A long-handled broom leaned against the wall. Everything useful, nothing wasted. "You hungry?" he asked, wiping his hands on a cloth. "I can make something," she offered quickly. "If you have a skillet." He didn't answer right away. Then he stepped aside, gesturing to the hearth. "There's cornmeal and a bit of lard in that tin. You know your way around Jonna cakes?" "Yes." She moved past him without brushing his arm, though it was a near thing. The rhythm of cooking steadied her, brought back cool mornings in her mother's kitchen, the smell of ash and butter. She didn't speak, and neither did he, but there was no discomfort in it. When they sat down to eat, the only sound was the scrape of forks and the occasional pop from the fire. It wasn't until halfway through the meal that he spoke again. "What trade was your father in?" She paused, then set her fork down. "He ran a print shop in Galesburg. Mostly papers, some religious tracts. After he passed, I helped keep it going for a while." Harland nodded slowly, like he was piecing something together. "You write with a steady hand, then?" "I do. Figures. You carry yourself like someone who knows how to put their thoughts in order." She wasn't sure how to take that, but it wasn't unkind. He finished his plate and leaned back, eyes settling on the window. The light outside had softened, gold pressing through the lace of pine boughs. "There's always work here if you want it. I could use help with the books, or with the garden, or whatever you're willing." "I'm not looking to be a burden," she said. "You aren't." That silenced her. After the dishes were washed and dried, Harland pulled on his coat and reached for his gloves. "I'll be out in the pasture most of the day. If you take a walk, there's a creek downhill. follows the treeline. Coyotes keep their distance, but you might want this. He handed her a small revolver. It fit awkwardly in her palm, the grip smooth from use. You don't have to fire it. Just keep it close. She nodded, turning the weapon over with careful fingers. He watched her for a moment, then stepped outside, shutting the door behind him. Prudence stood alone in the quiet house, the weight of the revolver unfamiliar and strange. She set it gently on the shelf, then walked to the window, watching his figure grow smaller as he crossed the rise. The wind moved through the grass around him, bending it low, then letting it rise again. She spent the morning clearing the ashes from the stove and sweeping the floor. Later, she filled a basin and scrubbed the dust from her dress, hanging it near the fire to dry. By midday, she had found a rhythm, not comfort, not yet, but something like direction. When Harland returned near sundown, the scent of stew met him at the door. She didn't say anything as he hung his hat, just handed him a bowl and sat across from him again. "You didn't have to cook," he said, eyeing the pot on the hearth. "I wanted to." He nodded, then tasted it. "You've a good hand with seasoning." She allowed herself a small breath of pride. After supper, he brought a box from the back room and slid it toward her. Inside were ledgers, ink, and a bundle of old receipts tied with twine. "You said you kept a print shop," he said. "If your figures are true, you'll find this mess insulting." She smiled faintly. "I've seen worse." She took up the ledger and flipped through the columns. "You've been shorted on your corn delivery. Twice." He raised a brow. "That's so?" "Yes. The handwriting's different, but the numbers don't match." He leaned forward, studying her face more than the page. "You're sharp." "I had to be." He didn't argue with that. As the fire burned low, she returned the papers to the box and stood. "I'll finish the rest tomorrow." He rose too. "You'll tell me if something's owed to you." "I will." She turned to go, then paused. "Thank you for trusting me." Harland's voice was low but certain. "You've done nothing to make me doubt you." She stepped into the hallway, her hand brushing the doorframe, and glanced back once. He was still watching her, but not in a way that asked anything. Just steady. She closed the door behind her, the warmth of the room lingering against her skin. Outside, the wind rose, high and lonesome over the ridge. But inside the walls of that house, she felt something she hadn't in a long while. Not safe. Not yet. But seen. The next morning, frost clung to the grass like a veil, and Prudence stood at the edge of the porch, shawl tight around her shoulders. The land stretched wide and silent, gold where the sun touched it, blue where the shadows still curled. Behind her, the warmth of the stove pulsed through the walls, but she lingered outside, watching the way the light moved across the slope. Harland emerged from the barn, coat dusted with hay, a shovel slung over one shoulder. His boots left dark prints in the frost as he crossed toward her. He didn't speak until he'd closed the distance. "Ground's too hard to dig fence holes today," he said. "But the south troughs froze again. I'll head down with the pick." She glanced toward the hills. "Do you want help?" "You've already got the books to mind. I finished them before breakfast." He studied her a moment, then gave a short nod. "All right, it's a ways down and there's no path. I can manage a slope." They walked in silence, the air sharp enough to sting the lungs. The path wound between junipers and bare cottonwoods, the leaves long fallen. She kept pace without complaint, boots crunching over frozen needles and brittle stones. When they reached the trough, Harland set to work breaking the ice, the sound of iron on frozen water ringing through the trees. Prudence crouched by the edge and cleared away the broken shards with a branch, hands red from the cold. "Do you ever wish you'd settled closer to town?" she asked. He paused, leaning on the handle of his pick. I was born out here. My father used to say a man's only as honest as the distance between him and the nearest saloon. She laughed, the sound surprising both of them. And do you believe that? I believe quiet keeps a man clearer in the head. She nodded, then looked down at the creek beyond the trough. My mother used to say there was no such thing as quiet. Just sounds you hadn't learned to listen for yet. Harland didn't answer for a long while. Then he said, "She sounds like someone worth remembering." She was. She died 2 winters past. Fever took her quick. He didn't offer sorry, just nodded. You favor her? I favor my father in the eyes. But I've her temper, or so he used to say. He chuckled. You've kept it well hidden. She stood and brushed her skirt free of ice. I've had cause to keep a great many things hidden. They walked back up the slope together, slower now. When they reached the house, she placed a hand on the porch rail and turned to him. I'd like to earn my keep properly, she said. Not just by cooking and sorting ledgers. If you've sewing, mending, anything needing hands, I'd like to take it up. He hesitated. I'm not asking for charity, she added. I'm asking for work. All right, he said. There's a tear in the plow harness and a split in the grain sack. You can find the needle and pitch in the chest by the hearth. She gave a single nod and disappeared inside. That evening, as Harland finished brushing down the mule, he caught the faint glow of lamplight through the kitchen window. Inside, Prudence sat at the table, head bent, fingers moving with practiced care. The repaired harness lay beside her, neat stitches running clean along the edge. He stepped in quietly, shutting the door behind him. Got it done? He asked. She looked up, eyes tired but steady. It'll hold. Might not be pretty, but it's strong. Strength matters more. She pushed back from the table and stood, rubbing her hands. There's a letter I'd like to send. Do you have paper? In the drawer near the stove. She pulled it open and took a single sheet, folding it in half before sitting again. He watched her dip the pen, her fingers precise. The firelight played along her jaw as she wrote, lips moving faintly with the words she shaped. When she finished, she held the paper for a moment, then folded it and tucked it into her pocket. Old friend, he asked. My aunt. She raised me after my mother passed. I want her to know I've landed safe. He nodded once. I'll take it into town next week. Thank you. She lingered by the hearth, one hand resting on the mantel. I still don't know what comes next, but I'm not frightened of the not knowing anymore. Harland leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You don't have to decide it all at once. She looked over at him, something quiet in her gaze. I know. The fire crackled low between them. You ever think of marrying? She asked suddenly, voice low. I have. She waited, but he didn't add to it. She looked down, fingers brushing over the edge of the mantel. I thought I could make something new with that man, Luther, even though I didn't really know him. It was foolish. No, Harland said. It was brave. She lifted her eyes to his, and the weight of her grief softened just slightly. I don't want to be beholden to someone who pities me, she said. I don't pity you. Her breath caught, barely. Then what do you feel? Harland didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, slowly, as if not to startle her, until they stood within reach of one another. His voice was quiet. Respect. Admiration. A steadiness I haven't felt in years. She didn't speak, but her shoulders lowered, and for the first time, her posture eased without effort. Then she turned back toward the table and lifted the repaired harness, folding it neatly. Tomorrow, I'll start on the grain sack. She didn't wait for his reply, just walked to her room and closed the door gently behind her. Harland stood alone in the firelight, the scent of pitch and leather still hanging in the air. Outside, The frost had begun to settle again, but inside, something warmer had taken hold, something growing slow and sure. By mid-October, the first snow came in thin flurries, drifting across the valley like ash from some unseen fire. It didn't stay, not yet, but it clung to the edges of fence rails and settled in the hollows between rocks. Prudence stood on the porch with a shawl looped over her elbows, watching a single crow hop along the fence line, its black feathers stark against the pale ground. Inside, Harland stirred the coals in the stove, the scrape of iron muffled by the thick walls. He hadn't spoken much that morning, not out of distance, but preoccupation. A cow had gone lame 2 days earlier, and his attention had turned toward the wintering of the herd. Prudence stepped back in, stamping snow from her boots. I brought in the kindling. There's a soft limb down near the creek, some of it's dry enough to split. You carried it up yourself? I didn't see anyone else around, she said, pulling the shawl from her shoulders. Harland looked over then, his brow drawn. Don't strain your back. If you need the sled, take it next time. I'm capable, she said, not defensive, just certain. He nodded once, not doubting that. It was a matter of sense, not strength. She stirred the pot on the stove, inhaled the scent of barley and onion, and asked, Have you always wintered the herd yourself? No. My brother used to help. His voice had a rough edge, like it had caught unexpectedly on a stone. He died 6 years ago. Horse rolled crossing the high pass. I'm sorry. Harland didn't answer, just set the kettle on the iron grate. I didn't know you had a brother. Most don't. He was younger, quieter. Folks thought I was the serious one. He gave a short exhale. He was the reason I stayed after my folks died. Couldn't leave him to run things alone. She ladled soup into 2 bowls, set them on the table. You ever thought of selling the herd? Moving somewhere easier? I did once, he said. Year after my brother passed. Rode as far as Billings, talked to a man about a freighting job. But when I got there, I couldn't think what I'd do without the land. She sat across from him, resting her spoon against the bowl's rim. I've never had land. Not like this. Would you want it? She looked out the window. The snow had slowed, but the air still held that waiting hush. I don't know. I think I'd want a place that stayed mine, that no one could take or leave without me saying so. Harland leaned back slightly, elbows on his knees. You'll have that. Whether it's here or elsewhere, you'll have it. She didn't speak, but her eyes stayed on his. After a long moment, she reached for her bread and dipped it into the soup, the motion unhurried. Later, after the dishes were washed and the light had faded into that deep, slate blue of early winter evenings, Prudence sat by the fire with a mending hoop in her lap. Harland read from a leather-bound volume, the pages worn soft at the corners. The silence between them wasn't empty, it moved with the rhythm of shared space, of lives beginning to align. I think I'll stay through Christmas, she said, not looking up from her stitching. Harland didn't lift his eyes from the page. You're welcome as long as you like. I'm not sure what comes after. Whatever it is, he said, you won't face it alone. She set the hoop aside, the thread glinting in the firelight. I've been thinking about the letter I sent my aunt. She wrote back. Said I should come home, that there's still work at the church school. He closed the book, setting it gently on the table. Is that what you want? She looked into the fire. I thought it was once, but I'm not the same woman who left Galesburg. Harland stood and crossed to the hearth, crouching beside her. You're stronger now. I was strong then. I was just quiet about it. He nodded slowly. Then maybe now's the time to be loud. She turned to face him, her voice low. I'm not asking for promises. I wouldn't give one unless I meant it. The fire popped, sending a small spray of ember into the grate. Prudence reached out and brushed ash from the edge of his sleeve, fingers lingering a moment longer than necessary. "Harland," she said, just his name. His hand came to rest lightly over hers, warm and sure. "You won't be left, Prudence. Not by me." She didn't cry, and she didn't speak, but her shoulders came forward and she leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest. He held her there, one arm around her back, the other steady at her shoulder. No more words passed between them that night. None were needed. Outside, the wind shifted direction, carrying the scent of pine and snow through the valley. Inside, two hearts, once cautious and alone, had begun to beat in rhythm. By late November, the earth had hardened beneath a light crust of snow, and the hush of winter settled over the valley like a worn quilt. The days passed with a steady rhythm, feeding stock, hauling water, mending what needed mending. Prudence had taken to wearing a wool coat of Harland's over her dress. The sleeves rolled once at the wrists. Neither of them spoke of how naturally she fit into the house now, how her shawl hung beside his on the peg, how her comb rested beside his shaving tin. One morning, just after dawn, Harland returned from the barn with a split lip and blood on his collar. Prudence dropped the tin cup she was scrubbing. "What happened?" "Bull caught me with his horn," he said, breath shallow. "He's half blind on that side. I came around too quick. Sit. Now." He did, without protest, wincing as he lowered himself into the chair. She gathered clean cloth and carbolic, her hands already moving with practiced calm. "You've had worse," she said as she dabbed his lip. "But you should have called me out. You were asleep, which is not the same as useless." He chuckled, then winced again. "Didn't say it was." She worked in silence a moment, then asked, "You ever think about hiring a hand? Costs too steep, and most folks with sense are already settled in closer to Bozeman." He paused. "Though I've been thinking more about it lately." She met his eyes then. "Because I'm here? Because I'd rather not risk something worse next time." She nodded once, then returned to her work. When she was done, she dabbed his chin and pulled back. "You need to rest. I'll mend the gate later." "You'll rest," she said again, firmer this time. He didn't argue. That afternoon, while Harland slept with a quilt pulled to his waist, Prudence hitched the mule and drove it into town. She hadn't left the ranch since the day she arrived, but she knew the road now, knew the turns and dips and where the snow gathered in ridges. The sky was overcast, but the wind had settled, and the quiet of the land felt like a promise. At the mercantile, she traded eggs and dried beans for flour, tobacco, and a new length of cloth. On her way out, she passed the church and paused beside the steps, her breath clouding around her. She went in. The pews were empty, the air still. At the front, a single lantern burned low on the altar. She sat in the third row and folded her hands. She didn't pray, not exactly, but she thought of her mother, her father, the smallness of her life before and the wide, slow days she held now. She thought of the way Harland had reached for her hand without hesitation, the way he'd left space for her to grow into herself. When she stepped back into the snow, she walked taller. Harland met her at the gate when she returned. His lip was swollen, but he smiled when he saw her bundled on the bench seat, reins in hand. "You shouldn't have gone alone. You were in no shape to go." He helped her down, his fingers lingering at her elbow. "I'm not used to someone looking after me." "You've earned it," she said, brushing a flake from his collar. "And I'm not in the habit of leaving things half done." They unloaded the supplies together in the fading light. That night, over stew thick with barley and salt pork, she unfolded the cloth she'd bought. "I want to sew new curtains for the front window," she said. "The ones there now are threadbare." He studied the fabric. "That's your color." She looked up. You think so? He nodded. Reminds me of the sky just before snow. She folded the cloth carefully. I wasn't sure what kind of woman I'd be out here, whether I'd vanish into the land or find my shape against it. You've shaped it, he said. They finished supper in a quiet made easier by warmth. Later, as she stitched by the fire and he carved a handle for a broken drawer, he said, There's something I'd ask, if you're ready. She didn't look up. Say it plain. I'd like you to stay, not just through Christmas, not just for the winter. I'd like you to stay for good. Her needle stilled. You're asking me to marry you? I am. She set her sewing aside, folded her hands. Not because I need a place. No. Not because I've nowhere else to go. No, he said again, firmer. Then say it as it is. He rose, crossed to where she sat, and knelt beside her. I love you, Prudence. I want to build a life where you're not just beside me, but part of me. Every season, every morning, every hard day and quiet night. She reached for his hand. Then yes, he stood and drew her up with him. They didn't kiss, not yet, but stood close, foreheads touching. The heat of the fire behind them and the warmth of a future ahead. They married 2 weeks later at the edge of the frozen creek, with snow soft underfoot and the sky pale above. The preacher from town stood shivering in his coat while Harland slipped a simple silver band onto her hand. She wore a dress she'd sewn from the cloth she'd chosen, and Harland had shaved with care, the scar on his lip still healing. Afterward, they shared a supper of roast and root vegetables, just the two of them, and listened to the wind press against the walls like a soft drum. That night, they lay together with no space between them, her head tucked beneath his chin, his arm around her waist. By spring, the curtains were up, the earth had softened, and the valley bloomed in wild mustard and lupin. Prudence tended a small garden behind the house, her hands in the soil, steady and sure. Harland built her a writing desk by the window where the light fell just right in the mornings. They never spoke again of the man who hadn't come for her. He had no place in the life she'd claimed. When storms came, they weathered them together. When laughter came, it echoed off the walls and curled into the rafters. They fought sometimes, as all people do, but never with cruelty. And always they came back to each other. In time, neighbors stopped calling her the bride who'd been abandoned, and came to know her as Prudence Ellery, strong of back, clear of mind, and sharp of tongue when need be. She belonged to the land now, and it to her. Harland aged with her, the lines on his face deepening beside hers. Their home remained a place of warmth, of hard-earned peace, and of love rooted deeper than any sorrow could reach. And they were happy, fully, quietly, and for all their days.